She said it in front of the kids. Right in the living room. I vacuum every morning. Why are you acting like this is your house? She snapped. You're just the babysitter. I stood there, dish towel in hand, stunned by the slap of her words. That's when I decided, fine, if I'm just the babysitter, then I'll let the real owner come back and reclaim what's his. You can tell a lot about a woman by the way she loads a dishwasher. Me? I like order. Big plates in the back, small ones in front, forks and spoons divided just right. It's not about being perfect. It's about keeping things peaceful. Kelsey? My daughter-in-law? She'll shove a steak knife in next to a baby bottle and slam it shut like it's a war cry. But I don't say anything. I never do. Not because I'm afraid, but because I'm tired of walking on eggshells in a house that used to be mine. You wouldn't know that to look at it now. The white picket fence, I painted that myself. 30 years ago, the maple tree in the front yard. My late husband, Joe, planted it when our son was born. And the little handprints in the sidewalk leading to the porch, one of those is mine, but none of that matters to Kelsey. To her, I'm just the old lady who lives upstairs and helps out with the kids. Except I'm not just helping. I raise those babies while she runs around town doing God knows what. It started small. Can you watch them for an hour? Turned into full days, then nights, then weeks. My son Brian works offshore half the month. And when he's home, he barely talks, always looking at the floor like it holds the answers. He used to be close to me. He used to hug me just for walking into a room. Now he avoids my eyes. I think she taught him that. The last straw didn't come in a shout. It came in a whisper. Tuesday morning, I was folding laundry on the couch, matching tiny socks, the baby's onesie, a little pajama shirt with rocket ships. Kelsey storms in, purse on her arm, and phone to her ear. She's pacing, annoyed, not unusual, but then she says loudly into the phone, well, I can't make that decision. This isn't my house. The babysitter's got the kids. Yeah, my mother-in-law. She lives here. Ugh. Long story. I stop folding. She glances at me, shrugs, and adds, don't worry. She acts like it's her place. But it's not. She's just the babysitter. I'd changed her baby's diapers, taught her 5-year-old how to read, took care of this house when she and Brian couldn't pay the mortgage one winter, and still just the babysitter. She walked out without even noticing the basket in my lap. I sat there, every muscle stiff, like I'd been struck. That night, I called my brother Dennis. Dennis is a real estate attorney. He helped Joe and me set up the living trust back when we still thought our son might finish college and settle down with a sweet girl next door. We were wrong on both counts. I told Dennis everything. Do you remember? I said. What Joe and I agreed on when we refinanced back in 2003. There was a pause on the line. Lorraine, he said slowly. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Yes, I whispered. I want to know who really owns this house. The next morning, Dennis showed up at the door with a folder. Kelsey wasn't home. The kids were in the back watching cartoons. Dennis sat across from me at the table. The same table where Joe once carved his initials into the leg. This house, Dennis said, tapping the folder, is still in your name. You and Joe's trust. Brian never finalized the transfer paperwork when he moved in. The refinance title was never updated. I blinked. So you're telling me you're not the babysitter, Lorraine, he said. You're the owner. I covered my mouth with both hands. All this time, all this disrespect. And it was still my house. I'm guessing Brian doesn't know, I asked. Highly unlikely. He probably assumes it was taken care of years ago. I nodded. For the first time in years, my spine felt straight. Dennis leaned forward. What do you want to do? I looked around the kitchen. The same yellow curtains I picked out with Joe. The same fridge with the same magnets holding up crayon drawings. I want them out, I said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. You sure? I'm tired of being invisible in my own home, and I'm tired of letting my grandchildren watch their mother treat me like a doormat. Dennis nodded once. We can do this right, he said. Legally. Cleanly. I stared out the window. Good, I said, because I'm not going to raise another generation of children in a house where their grandmother is called the babysitter. That weekend, Kelsey was gone again. Said she had errands. Brian was home. The kids were playing outside. I sat down across from my son at the kitchen table. Brian, I said. We need to talk. He looked up, wary. I know things have been tense, I said, and I've tried to be respectful, but I'm not going to let myself be disrespected anymore. He looked confused. I slid the folder across the table. He opened it, read. His face changed. Slowly, like the way light shifts when a storm rolls in. This says that the house is still mine, I finished. And legally, I can ask you both to leave. He swallowed hard. I didn't know. I believe you, I said, but ignorance doesn't excuse neglect. He blinked, stunned. I stood up. I'm not throwing you out yet, but you tell Kelsey. Starting Monday, things change. No more barking orders. No more dismissing me in front of the children. No more pretending I'm the help. Or you'll both be looking for somewhere else to live. Brian sat silently. Not angry, not defensive. Just silent. I left the room and went outside to watch the kids on the swing set. Joe built by hand. The wind rustled the leaves of the maple tree. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the house remembered who it belonged to. There's something strange about watching someone walk confidently into a trap you didn't set, but simply revealed. I didn't tell Kelsey right away. I let Brian do it. After our conversation at the table, I gave him a full 24 hours. Time to let it sink in. Time to explain things to his wife in private. Time to do what was right, or at least, brace for it. By the next evening, I was sipping peppermint tea when the front door slammed so hard the paintings rattled. Kelsey stormed into the kitchen, her sunglasses still perched on her head like a crown. You had a lawyer go through the title, she barked. Behind our backs? I took another calm sip of tea. No, I said. I had my brother check the title. The same brother who helped Joe and me buy this house before you even met Brian. She scoffed. You're seriously going to throw legal paperwork at us? This is petty. You live here, we live here, we're family. I set my teacup down gently. You called me the babysitter, Kelsey. It was a joke, she said quickly, eyes flicking to Brian, who had quietly appeared in the doorway. God, why are you so sensitive? I looked at her squarely. I'm not sensitive, I'm just done. Brian rubbed the back of his neck. Kelsey started pacing like a caged animal. Okay. So what? You're going to kick us out? Your own son. I didn't say that, I said. But I did say things are going to change. Her mouth opened, but I raised my hand before she could speak again. You will speak to me with respect in front of the children. You will stop dumping them on me without notice. You will stop treating this house like it belongs to you. It does belong to us, she shrieked. Brian finally spoke, quiet, but clear. No, Kels, it doesn't. Mom's name is still on everything. That stopped her cold. She stared at him. You knew? He nodded. I found out yesterday. Her mouth twisted, and for a moment I thought she might explode. Instead, she laughed, sharp and bitter. So this is the plan? Gang up on me? Make me out to be the bad guy? You made yourself out to be the bad guy, I said, standing. I just stopped pretending otherwise. She glared at me like I'd slapped her. Then, without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed upstairs. Brian looked at me. I looked back. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I really didn't know. I believe you, I said. But now you do know. And that means you have choices. He nodded. Then he followed her up the stairs like a man walking toward a cliff. The next week was tense. Kelsey stopped speaking to me entirely. She started doing petty things, turning off the washer mid-cycle when I was doing the kids' laundry, changing the grocery list, letting the baby cry longer than usual before handing her to me. But I didn't react. I wasn't playing checkers. I was playing chess. I started keeping a log, dates, times, incidents. Nothing crazy, just a record. Because when people get desperate, they get messy. And I knew it was only a matter of time before she'd slip, and slip she did. 3 days later, I walked into the living room to find 5-year-old Ellie crying on the floor. She'd fallen and scraped her elbow. Kelsey was in the backyard on her phone laughing loudly with a friend. I cleaned Ellie up, kissed her forehead and put her in front of the TV. Then I went outside. "You left her alone?" I asked. My voice calm, cold. Kelsey looked up, clearly irritated. "She's fine. Kids fall." She could have hit her head. Kelsey rolled her eyes. I didn't say another word. I went inside, documented it in my log, and emailed a copy to my brother with the subject line, "Just in case." The next day, I made my real move. I called the real owner. Not me. Not Brian. My grandson, Joey. He's not technically the owner yet. But Joe and I had drawn up a backup clause in the trust before we passed it to Brian. One that stated, if Brian failed to complete the property paperwork or showed signs of financial mismanagement, guardianship of the estate could skip directly to his child upon recommendation of a family trustee. Guess who the family trustee is? Me. And guess who was finally ready to file that recommendation? Also me. Joey is 9, too young to know what any of this means, but old enough to remember who helped him with homework, who showed up to every school play, who made pancakes on Saturday mornings when no one else was awake. So I contacted Dennis. He filed the trust amendment papers. We weren't removing Brian completely, but we were adding Joey to the deed in a conditional role. Once he's of age, he'll inherit it directly. That gave me one final card to play. Because now, Kelsey didn't just have to deal with me. She had to face the fact that this house was legally destined for the boy she kept treating like an inconvenience. That weekend, I hosted a dinner, nothing fancy, just spaghetti, garlic bread, and a salad. I made enough for everyone. Set the table. Brian came down first, carrying the baby. Kelsey followed, suspicious. "Is this a setup?" she asked. I smiled. "It's a meal." She sat reluctantly. We ate mostly in silence, except for the kids' chatter. Then, as I was pouring tea, I said it. "I filed an amendment to the trust this week." Brian looked up, his fork halfway to his mouth. Kelsey froze. "Joey's name is now on the deed, as future inheritor." She gasped. "You can't do that. I already did." Her face flushed red. "This is my house too." "No," I said calmly. "It never was. You just treated it like your own because I let you." She turned to Brian. "Say something." Brian looked at his plate. And said nothing. I stood. "This house will go to the person who treats it, and the people in it with care. And that's not you." She stormed out, slammed the door behind her. Brian stayed at the table. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my son, not her husband, not some ghost drifting through. Just Brian. "Thank you," he said softly. I didn't answer. I just passed him the bowl of salad. That night, I sat on the porch with Joey curled beside me. "Grandpa?" he asked. "Are we going to live here forever?" I looked up at the stars. "If you're kind," I said. "And if you listen." He nodded seriously. I will. And I believed him, because sometimes the real owner isn't the one holding the title today. It's the one being raised to protect it tomorrow. They say when people feel like they're losing control, they grab harder, even if it means pulling everything down with them. Kelsey didn't go quiet after dinner. No, that woman is many things, but subtle isn't one of them. By the next morning, she was back in full form, slamming cabinets, leaving dirty dishes on the counter, stomping around like a teenager grounded for the weekend. She didn't say anything directly to me, but the message was clear. She was trying to make me uncomfortable. Unfortunately for her, I've lived through 2 wars, 1 recession, and 38 years of marriage to a man who snored like a freight train. Uncomfortable is where I thrive. Still, I knew this was just the beginning. That woman wasn't going to let go of the illusion of power without a fight, and I was right. On Wednesday morning, I got a call from Ellie's preschool. The teacher sounded confused. "Hi, Mrs. Miller. Just confirming that Grandma Lorraine will still be doing pickup and drop-off this week." "Yes," I said. "Why?" "Well, Kelsey came in this morning and told us you were no longer authorized to pick Ellie up." I blinked. "She what?" The teacher hesitated. "We just wanted to double-check." Ellie seemed confused. "She said you always take her home." I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. It wasn't about pickup. It was about erasing me. And that wasn't something I was going to let slide. I waited until Friday. Brian was out working a night shift. Kelsey was alone, folding laundry in the living room. I stood in the doorway. "Why did you tell the school I'm not allowed to pick up Ellie?" She didn't look up. "I thought it was time we set some boundaries." "Is that so?" "Yes. I don't want you confusing the kids, acting like you're their mother." I let out a bitter laugh. "Believe me, Kelsey, they know the difference." She slammed the laundry basket down. "You're so obsessed with control. You just can't handle not being in charge anymore." I walked over and sat on the arm of the couch, calm, measured. "I've handled losing a lot in my life, Kelsey, but what I won't handle is being treated like I don't exist in the home I built, paid for, and protected." "Then maybe you shouldn't have let us move in," she snapped. I smiled. "Oh, honey, you didn't move in. I let you stay. There's a difference." She stood, eyes blazing. "You want us out? Fine, but when Brian finds out what you're doing, he already knows." I interrupted. "He was at the dinner table when I told you. And you know what? He didn't say a word, because even he knows I've been holding this house together." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I'm giving you 30 days, I said, standing up. "Enough time to find a place. After that, I want you out." "You can't kick us out," she hissed. "Legally," I said, turning to go. "I absolutely can." I didn't want to involve the kids, but children are smart. They notice when doors slam more than usual, when voices rise behind walls, when the silence at dinner is thicker than mashed potato. One night, I found Joey on the porch steps, hugging his knees. "Is Mommy mad at you?" he asked. I sat beside him. "She's not mad. She's scared." "Why?" "Because she's starting to learn there are consequences for how we treat people." He thought about that, nodding slowly. "Are you going to make her leave?" I didn't answer. Instead, I looked out across the yard, where the maple tree swayed gently in the breeze. "I'm going to make sure this house is safe. For you, for Ellie, for everyone who treats it and the people inside it with respect." He leaned his head against my arm, and I knew I was doing the right thing. Kelsey didn't go quietly. She tried charm. She tried crying. She even left a few job applications open on the kitchen counter, like I'd suddenly feel maternal, and offer to help her type up a resume. I didn't bite. The final straw came 2 weeks later, when I overheard her on the phone with her sister. "I can't believe this. The old bat is seriously kicking us out. Like, what does she think she's gonna do? Raise 2 kids alone in her 70s? I walked past the doorway just as she said it. She froze, we locked eyes, and in that moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. The next morning, I met Dennis at the courthouse. We filed the formal eviction notice, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I needed to protect myself. I wasn't going to be the invisible caretaker any longer. I was going to be the woman who taught her family what boundaries really look like. Back at the house, Brian was waiting at the table when I got home. He looked up, pale. "She told me you filed." "I did." He ran a hand through his hair. "She's packing." I nodded. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said. "I'm not," he replied. "I should have said something years ago." We sat in silence for a while. Then he asked, "Can I stay?" I looked at him for a long moment. "You need to decide who you are, Brian," I said softly. "Because if you want to live in this house, you need to be more than just someone's husband. You need to be my son again." He blinked, and for the first time I saw the man Joe and I raised. Not the one Kelsey had molded. He nodded once. "I'll prove it." When Kelsey left, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just walked out the door, dragging 2 suitcases behind her. She didn't say goodbye to the kids, didn't look back, and honestly, I was relieved. Ellie clung to my leg. Joey stood by the window watching the car disappear. "Is she gone forever?" he asked. I knelt down. "No, sweetie, she's just gone for now. Sometimes people need space to figure themselves out." "Will she come back?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I do know this. We're staying, and this house, this family, it's going to feel safe again." He nodded slowly, then hugged me tight. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, Brian appeared in the doorway. "Mom?" "Yes." He stepped inside holding something in his hands. It was a photo. Joe, me, and baby Brian on the front porch right after we bought the house. "I found this in one of Kelsey's boxes. Thought you might want it." I took the photo and for a moment, the weight of it hit me. Years of memories, love, pain, and now, closure. "Thank you," I whispered. "I'm sorry," he said. "For everything." "I know," I replied, and I meant it. Because forgiveness doesn't always come with trumpets and confetti. Sometimes, it just comes with a quiet moment at bedtime. And a photo you thought you'd never see again. There's something sacred about reclaiming space, not just the physical walls, but the peace inside them. After Kelsey left, the house was quiet in a way I hadn't heard in years. Not silent. Ellie still sang to her dolls and Joey dropped his cereal spoon every morning like clockwork. But peaceful. No door slams. No side-eyed jabs. No tension clinging to the air like humidity in July. I'd forgotten how light the house felt, without her anger pushing on the walls. Still, the damage she left behind wasn't just emotional. There were literal cracks, a broken cabinet hinge, sticky notes with passive-aggressive scribbles in the pantry. Even the guest bathroom had a leaky faucet that I hadn't noticed while I was too busy being just the babysitter. So I started fixing things, one small piece at a time. On a sunny Monday morning, I pulled the pink rubber gloves over my hands, opened the windows wide, and began deep cleaning the house from the baseboards up. I scrubbed her bitterness out of the grout. I vacuumed the entitlement out of the corner. I opened every closet, every drawer, and I cleared it all. Every scarf she left behind. Every coffee mug with snarky phrases like Queen Bee and Mom Boss. Out. Joey helped me with the garage. We turned it into something it hadn't been in years. usable. He swept, I organized. Brian fixed the creaky shelving. Even Ellie got in on the action, proudly labeling a cardboard box, "Donate," in bright blue crayon. It felt good. No, it felt honest. Like we were finally honoring the home Joe and I built, instead of watching it be treated like a hotel room with a cranky manager. One night, about a week later, I stood in the hallway staring at the old linen closet. For years it had been stuffed with mismatched sheets, half-used candles and boxes of paperwork I hadn't touched in decades. I opened it slowly. Inside, near the back, was a metal tin. One I hadn't seen since before Joe passed. Inside that tin, letters. Dozens of them. From Joe. From me. From our son when he was young. Hand-drawn Mother's Day cards with backwards S's and smiley suns. At the bottom was a yellowing envelope labeled for Lorraine. When you need reminding. I sat on the floor and opened it. Joe's handwriting stared back at me. Still sharp, still his. Lorraine, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone, which means you're still fighting for this family like you always have. Don't let anyone, not Brian, not anyone he marries, not even yourself, make you feel small in a house you built with your hands. You've always been the heart of this home, and no one gets to rewrite that truth. I read it 3 times, tears silently sliding down my cheeks. Then I stood up, folded the letter gently, and placed it in a new frame on the hallway shelf. It sat there beside a candle and a little ceramic cardinal Joey made last Christmas. It was the first time in a long while the house felt like mine again. That weekend, I went to the hardware store. I bought fresh paint, a soft sage green for the kitchen, and creamy white for the upstairs hallway. I replaced the dingy light fixture in the entryway with one that looked just like the one Joe picked out years ago but never got around to installing. I even bought new light linen, not heavy blackout ones like Kelsey insisted on. The sunlight came back. It poured into the house. Even Brian noticed. "Feels different in here," he said one morning, sipping his coffee at the kitchen table. I smiled as I stirred the pancake batter. "It's healing," he nodded. Then he glanced around and added, "So am I." Brian began showing up more. Not just physically, but presently. He helped with dishes, picked Ellie up from school, sat on the porch with me in the evenings, while Joey rode his bike up and down the street. One night, he looked at me over the rim of his coffee mug and said, "I didn't know how much I was missing until she left." I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "It's not too late to remember who you are." He nodded, and I believed him, because there was a softness returning to his face I hadn't seen in years. The weight of Kelsey's control was melting off him, piece by piece. I didn't expect the letter from Kelsey. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name scrawled in that sharp handwriting of hers. Inside a single page. "Lorraine, I know you think I'm the villain. I didn't grow up like Brian. I didn't have a safe house or someone who made pancakes every Saturday. I didn't know how to be part of a family like yours. I made mistakes. I was angry. Maybe I still am, but I do love the kid. I hope one day they know that. And I hope one day you and I can find a way to stop hating each other." Kelsey. I stared at the letter for a long time. I didn't hate her. I never had. I pitied her. Because the one thing I'd always had. Love. Stability. A sense of home. She'd never learned to offer, even when it was handed to her. I tucked the letter away. Didn't show Brian, didn't show the kids. Some things don't need to be shared. Some things are just acknowledgments, not apologies. Not enough, but something. Later that week, I sat down with Dennis. We went over the updated deed. Everything was in order. Joey's future inheritance was secured. Brian was listed as a resident, not an owner. And me, I was firmly planted at the top, the way it always should have been. Dennis leaned back in his chair. and smiled. You did it, Lorraine. No, I said. I undid it. He laughed softly. Fair enough. He handed me the papers, and I held them like they weighed more than a stack of documents, like they were proof that a woman can be erased, only if she lets it happen, and I never would again. That night, I sat on the porch with Ellie in my lap and Joey leaning against my side. The sun dipped below the trees. Brian stood on the front steps, humming softly as he watered the plant. The maple tree rustled gently, like it was saying welcome back, and I finally breathed, not because it was over, but because it had begun again. A home, not a house. And I wasn't the babysitter. I was the keeper. The first time I saw Kelsey again was at the grocery store. It had been a month since she left. A quiet, peaceful, healing month. Ellie had stopped waking up crying in the middle of the night. Joey had started doing better at school. Brian was still a work in progress, but he was smiling more and drinking less. And me, I was remembering what it felt like to have control over my own life, my own space. So, when I turned the corner by the canned soups and saw her messy bun, ripped jeans, staring blankly at a dented can of tomato paste, my first reaction wasn't anger, it was pity. She looked small, tired. She glanced up, froze, and clutched the shopping basket against her chest like a shield. We locked eyes for a full 5 seconds. Then she turned and disappeared down the next aisle without a word. I stood there for a long moment before slowly continuing my shopping. I didn't follow. I didn't chase. I didn't need to. Because when someone's made their bed in disrespect, eventually they have to lie in it alone. That night, Brian was waiting on the porch when I got home. He looked restless. She reached out, he said the moment I sat down. Kelsey? He nodded, said she saw you at the store. She asked if we could talk. I raised an eyebrow. She wants to come back? I don't think so, he replied. At least not to live. But maybe to apologize, or try to. I don't know. I stared out at the yard, at the maple tree. She's the mother of your children, I said. That door will never fully close, but my door. She's already slammed it shut herself. I'm not the one who broke it, he nodded slowly. I understand, and I think in that moment he really did. Days passed. Then a week, no more word from Kelsey. And then, just as I'd stopped thinking about her altogether, the letter came. Not from her, from a lawyer. Kelsey was petitioning for partial guardianship of Joey and Ellie, with an attached proposal for scheduled weekly visits. It wasn't an attack, exactly. More like a chess move, one meant to remind me that while I had the house, the title and the trust, she still had something to say when it came to the children. And she wasn't wrong. But she wasn't right, either. I called Dennis immediately. He reviewed the petition, then leaned back in his chair and gave me a look I knew too well. It's not aggressive, he said, but it's calculated. She's trying to insert herself into their lives on her terms before we define the terms without her. I nodded. I don't want to shut her out entirely, I said, but I do want to protect the kids. Then we respond, he said, with your own petition, one that makes it clear you are the guardian of record, that you decide what's best for Joey and Ellie, not someone who disappeared for over a month. I hesitated. She'll twist it, I said. She always does. Say I poisoned the kids against her, that I'm manipulating Brian, that I'm keeping her children hostage. Dennis gave me a knowing look. Lorraine, no court will believe that. Not with your record. Not with the logs, the letters, the testimony from the teachers. You've been the only stable adult in their lives since they could walk. I took a breath. Then I said, let's do it. And just like that, The next chapter of the battle began. I told Brian over coffee. He didn't react the way I feared. He didn't defend her. He didn't scowl. He just said, "I'll talk to her. But I won't stop you." "You shouldn't," I replied. "This isn't about revenge anymore. This is about protection." He nodded. Then he looked down at his coffee mug. "I've been talking to someone," he said after a long pause. I raised an eyebrow. "A counselor," he added quickly. I want to do better." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "You already are." A week later, we were in court. Not a full trial, just a formal hearing. Kelsey showed up wearing a crisp white blouse and a look of righteous indignation. She barely glanced at me. The judge reviewed the documents quietly for nearly 10 minutes. Then he looked up and said, "Mrs. Miller, would you like to speak?" I stood. My knees didn't shake. "My name is Lorraine Miller," I began. "I am the legal owner of the residence in which my grandchildren reside. I have been their daily caretaker since infancy. I prepare their meals, attend their school events, ensure their safety, and provide emotional support. Their mother," I paused, glancing at Kelsey, "has been largely absent for the past several weeks, and while I acknowledge her right to be involved, I believe her return to influence should be gradual, structured, and reviewed regularly." The judge nodded, jotting something down. Kelsey stood next, and as expected, she turned it into theater. She cried. She clutched her tissue like a prop. She said words like alienation and vindictive, and I was under stress. But she didn't say she'd been wrong, not once, and that told me everything I needed to know. The judge saw it too. When the hearing ended, temporary guardianship was granted to me with supervised visits for Kelsey, once a week, pending review after 3 months. It wasn't a full lockout, but it was control, my control. And when we walked out of that courtroom, Kelsey's heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor, I felt taller than I had in years. That night, Joey asked if we were going to have a party. "For what?" I smiled. "For winning," he said. I pulled him close. "This isn't about winning, sweetheart. It's about keeping you safe." He frowned. "Is Mommy mad?" I kissed his forehead. "She's confused, but we're going to help her get better from a distance." He nodded like he understood more than any 9-year-old should have. And in that moment, I hated her again, just a little, for putting that weight on his shoulders. Later that week, we painted Joey's room. He picked blue like the sky at the park. Ellie got to choose her new bedding, rainbows and clouds. Brian fixed the broken curtain rod in my room without being asked. And I stood in the doorway that evening watching the children sleep, and thought, this is what rebuilding looks like. Not revenge, not punishment, restoration. One afternoon, during Ellie's ballet class, I sat on the bench outside the studio when a woman sat down next to me. Slightly younger, kind eyes. "Are you Ellie's grandma?" "I am," I said proudly. "She's got the best posture of all the girls." The woman smiled. "You must work with her. I just remind her to believe in herself." "That's enough," she said. And maybe it was, because that's what this whole thing had been about from the beginning. Not power, not revenge, just making sure no one dimmed the light in these children before they had a chance to shine. They don't tell you that sometimes peace feels uncomfortable at first. After years of tension, of dodging insults at breakfast and walking on eggshells by bedtime, the absence of conflict feels unnatural, like the air's too clean, like your ears are searching for a door slam that doesn't come. But that's how healing begins. In the quiet, Brian was settling in again, slowly, awkwardly, like a man learning to walk after years of limping behind someone else's stride. He started cooking on Sunday mornings. Nothing fancy. Usually burnt toast and scrambled eggs with too much pepper. But it was the first time in years he tried. And the kids flourished. Joey brought home a science award. Ellie stopped having stomach aches before preschool. We started playing board games in the evening again, the kind that ended in laughter and silly arguments over who cheated at Uno. And for the first time in a long time, I thought maybe we were going to be okay. But with Kelsey, things are never that simple. It started with a Facebook post. A friend of mine from church sent me a screenshot. There was Kelsey, holding a photo of Ellie, captioned with "missing my little girl more than anything." Some people forget who the real mom is. It had over 2 and a comment section full of people chiming in things like, "You'll get her back, mama. Grandmas need to stay in their place. Stealing someone's children isn't love, it's control." I stared at the screen. I hadn't cried in months, but something about that post, the falseness of it, the manipulation, the performance, made my chest tighten like a fist. Because I never stole anything. I protected them. I fed those babies, bathed them, held them through nightmares while she was out finding herself in someone else's apartment. I gave everything I had, and somehow, I was still the villain in her version of the story. I didn't respond publicly. That would have given her what she wanted, attention. But I did keep the screenshot. I emailed it to Dennis. He called the next day. "She's baiting you," he said. "Trying to build sympathy. She might be preparing for a custody fight." "She'll lose," I said flatly. "Yes, but that doesn't mean she won't try." He paused. "Are you ready for another round of this, Lorraine?" I looked out the window where Joey was playing catch with Brian in the yard. Ellie sat beside a flower bed, plucking petals and humming a made-up song. "I don't have a choice," I said, "because this isn't about me anymore. It never was." Brian saw the post too. He knocked on my door that night, holding his phone. "I talked to her," he said before I could say anything. "She's spinning a story, Brian." "I know," he sighed, "but she's their mother. Part of me still wants her to be better." I stared at him. "Wanting doesn't make someone fit to raise children." "I know," he repeated, quieter. We sat in silence for a while. Then he added, "I've started the paperwork to have my name fully restored on the trust." That made me look up. "She always threatened to ruin me if I did it," he said. "Said she'd take the kids, the money, everything." I raised an eyebrow. "And now," he took a deep breath, "now I know she already tried. And you stopped her." There it was. The recognition, the ownership, the son I'd raised was finally back. The next Sunday, I got a knock at the door. Not a gentle knock, a furious one. I opened it to find Kelsey standing on the porch, arms crossed, mascara smudged. "I need to see my children." I didn't blink. "This isn't your visitation day." "I don't care," she snapped. "They're my kids." "Then maybe you should have acted like a mother when you had the chance." Her face twisted. "I made mistakes, okay? But you've turned them against me. You made me out to be some monster." I folded my arm. "You did that all by yourself." We stood there, tension thick in the summer air. "I'm taking you back to court," she said finally. "Full custody." I didn't flinch. "Then I hope you've saved up for a good lawyer." She scoffed. "Brian can't afford one." I stepped forward. "But I can." She blinked. For the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. She turned and left without another word. I walked back inside and picked up the phone. "Dennis," I said, "we're tightening everything. Lock it down. No more leniency." He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Already on it." That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Joey. He was coloring a picture of a house. Ours, I think, with the maple tree out front and all 4 of us smiling. He held it up. "What do you think, Grandma?" I looked at the crayon-drawn smiles, the sun shining, the words "home" scribbled in rainbow colors across the top, and I almost broke. It's perfect, baby, I whispered, because that's what this fight had always been for. Not the house, not the title, but the feeling, the safety, the truth. Brian sat me down 2 days later. I filed for full guardianship, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Not just legally, emotionally. I am ready to step up, with your help. And for the first time, I believed him, because he didn't say it like a man trying to impress someone. He said it like a father. The court date came quickly. Kelsey showed up in a new dress and heels she couldn't quite walk in. She had a different lawyer this time, one who didn't look convinced of her case. Her argument was emotional, tearful, dramatic, but it lacked evidence. Meanwhile, we had piles of it: logs, witness statements, photos, letters. Joey's school counselor even wrote a glowing letter about how much he'd improved since living in a stable environment. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. I'm not asking the court to punish Kelsey, I said. I'm asking you to protect her children from the chaos she continues to create. Children need consistency, love, and stability, and right now, I'm the only one providing it. The judge nodded solemnly. His decision came 2 weeks later. Full guardianship awarded to Brian, with me as legal co-guardian and trustee. Kelsey was granted visitation only under supervised conditions, pending a psychological review and parenting course completion. It wasn't a total victory, but it was enough. That night, I sat on the porch alone. The air was still, the kids were asleep. Brian was reading in the living room, and for the first time in years, I felt still. No tension buzzing under my skin, no fear of retaliation, just the breeze, the stars, and a sense of peace, so deep, it felt like my soul finally exhaled. I wasn't just the babysitter. I was the warrior who saved this family, the anchor that held us in place. And now I was the guardian, not just of the children, but of the legacy, of everything Joe and I had built. And no one, not even Kelsey, was ever going to take that from me again. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come from silence. It comes from knowing your family is safe, knowing the fight is behind you, knowing you stood your ground and didn't let anyone bulldoze the life you built with your own 2 hands. That kind of peace, it's earned, and I earned it. Kelsey didn't appeal the judge's decision. I expected her to throw one more tantrum, fire off a few angry emails, or post another cryptic message about losing everything to bitterness. But after the final ruling, she went quiet, too quiet, if I'm being honest. Dennis suspected she was still trying to find a new lawyer, or maybe some angle to attack later. But legally, she was boxed in. The court order was solid. Our guardianship was locked. Even the supervised visitation clause had conditions she hadn't yet fulfilled. And emotionally, Joey had stopped asking about her. Ellie didn't even flinch when we passed a woman in a red blouse at the grocery store, even though that was always Kelsey's go-to color. They were healing. We all were. Brian started looking for work outside the city. He said he wanted to spend more time with the kids and less time commuting to an office where no one respected him. He took up woodworking again, something he hadn't done since he was a teenager. Turned the garage into a little workshop and made Ellie a toy chest, with her name carved on top. It made me tear up more than I expected, because that was the Brian I remembered, the boy who built birdhouses in middle school. Not the man who used to sit silently while his wife chipped away at everyone around her. I think I lost myself for a while, he said one night, as we sanded a shelf together. No, I told him. You just let someone else take the wheel. But you're driving now. And he was. One Saturday morning, I got a letter in the mail, no return address, handwritten. I opened it, and before I even saw the name, I knew who it was from. Lorraine. I've started the parenting course. It's court-ordered, but I'm actually learning things. Maybe too late, I know. I wanted to say something I should have said a long time ago. Thank you for loving them, for protecting them, for not letting me ruin them. I wasn't ready. I may never be, but you were. You are. I hope someday, when they're older, they understand why things had to happen this way. Kelsey, I sat at the kitchen table holding that letter for a long time, not crying, not angry, just still. She hadn't apologized exactly, but it wasn't an attack either. It was what it needed to be: acknowledgement that I was never just the babysitter, that I was the mother figure they needed when she couldn't be, that this home was mine. Not because I held the deed, but because I held it together. A few days later, Joey came home with a school project. Family tree, he announced, dropping a big piece of construction paper on the table. I need pictures. We dug through old photo albums, the kind with yellowed edges and dusty plastic sleeves. There was one of Joe holding newborn Brian in the hospital, one of me younger and stronger, holding Joey on my hip while planting tulips. He pointed to one where I was teaching Ellie to bake cookies. This one's going in the middle, he said. Why the middle? I asked. Because that's the most important person, right? I smiled and tried very hard not to cry. That night I sat down and started writing something, not for court, not for lawyers, just for me. It was a letter, one I intended to leave behind someday, something for the kids to find when they're older. When I'm gone, I wrote about Joe, about the house, about what it means to hold a family together, even when everything's falling apart. And I ended it like this: you might have heard that I was just the babysitter, but I want you to know I was the builder, the protector, the glue. And I loved you harder than anyone else ever could. That's the legacy I leave behind. Love and strength. And this home still standing, still safe, still ours. A few weeks later, something wild happened. A real estate agent knocked on our door. He introduced himself, shook my hand, and said, "I heard this property might be going on the market." I blinked. "From who?" He hesitated. "A woman named Kelsey said she had family ties here. Mentioned she used to live here and was considering selling the land." I smiled, and then I laughed. "Oh, honey," I said. "This land was never hers to sell, but thank you for stopping by." He left red-faced and stammering. I didn't even bother to call Dennis. I just made a fresh pot of coffee and sat on the porch, sipping it like I had all the time in the world, because I did. Ellie's birthday came. Brian asked if we could throw a party. Nothing big, just family and a few school friends. He decorated the backyard with rainbow streamers and a little bounce house. Joey helped frost the cupcakes. I made the lasagna. We sang, we danced. We played pin the tail on the unicorn. And at the end of it, as Ellie curled up in my lap, she whispered, "Best birthday ever, Grandma." I kissed the top of her head and thought, this is what victory looks like. Not a courtroom, not a signed deed. This sticky fingers, smiles that reach the eyes, a family that knows who their anchor is. Before bed that night, I stood in the doorway of their rooms. One by one. Joey was snoring softly, arms sprawled across his bed like a starfish. Ellie was curled up with her stuffed giraffe, the handmade quilt tucked under her chin. And I thought, this house, this home, is still full of life, because I kept it that way. The next morning, Brian handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. He smiled. Inside was a keychain, simple silver, engraved with 5 words. "This house is yours forever." I looked up at him. "Legally," I said. "It always was." "I know," he said. "But now, it's mine because of you, and I'll never forget that." I hugged him tight, because in the end, that was the real victory. Not revenge, not paperwork, recognition, respect, and finally, love, without condition.